The shadow in the basement. When Karina moved into the new house, she had no idea that she would witness the most horrifying events of her life. The house was old, abandoned, with peeling walls and creaky floors, but the price was so low that it didn't bother her. At first, everything seemed normal, but soon she began noticing odd things. Every night, when everything in the house fell silent, she would hear footsteps coming from the basement stairs. Karina tried to ignore these sounds, convincing herself that it was just the old house creaking. But the steps grew louder and clearer, and one day she decided to go down to the basement to find out what was happening. She opened the old door and stepped onto the lower landing, feeling the cold air squeezing her chest. It was dark down there, and her mobile phone lit only a small patch of the floor. Karina nervously glanced around, but aside from the sound of her own breathing, she heard nothing. The footsteps had stopped. Maybe I just can't stop thinking about the strangeness of this house, she thought, and began descending further. With each step, her footsteps grew louder, as if she was disturbing the silence that reigned in the basement. When she reached the lowest point, her gaze fell upon an old chest in the corner. It seemed forgotten for decades. Moving closer, Karina noticed that it was slightly open. It can't be. Her heart began to race. She bent down and peered inside. There was nothing inside, just a thick layer of dust that covered everything that might have been there once. Deciding that her imagination was playing tricks on her, Karina turned to go back upstairs, but at that moment, she felt something cold touch her shoulder. She spun around, but there was no one. However, when she looked into the dark corner of the basement, her eyes met something. The shape wasn't clear, but it was there, hiding in the dark. Karina didn't even have time to scream before that shape stepped forward. She rushed to the stairs, but something held her back, as if an invisible force was gripping her shoulder. In panic, she tried to break free, but that same invisible grasp held her tight, not letting her move. In terror, she started swinging her arms at the air when suddenly she felt something warm and sticky slowly wrap around her neck. It wasn't an ordinary hand. It was something else. Karina could feel her breath constricting, the ringing in her ears growing louder. Then, the light went out. When the light returned, Karina found herself standing in the same spot where she had just tried to escape from. But everything was different now. The room was brighter, as if illuminated by some strange light that didn't come from the lamp. But what she saw in the mirror made her heart stop. Her reflection in the mirror was different. It was smiling. She felt her blood freeze in her veins. Turning around, she saw that the basement was no longer empty. In the corner stood a figure, now fully visible. Slimy skin, like that of a corpse. Eyes, deep and empty, ones she couldn't place. Hands were withered and stretched, and the mouth was too wide for human form. "Don't you remember?" the creature whispered. Its voice was cold and hateful. "You've been here before. I always knew you'd come back." Karina couldn't move. She tried to scream, but no sound came from her throat. Fear paralyzed her, but her mind screamed that something had to be done. She began looking for an exit, but there was none. "You came back here, and now you'll be with me," the creature whispered as it moved closer. The same fear she felt the first time came back, when her shadow on the floor suddenly grew longer. She couldn't believe it was her shadow, because she was standing right in front of the mirror. And then everything became clear. It wasn't her reflection. It was the shadow of what she had once left in this house. the shadow that was now ready to take her back to where she had come from. Karina never left the basement.